They call ADX Florence the Alcatraz of the Rockies, a fortress for America's most dangerous, most unpredictable, and most isolated inmates. And inside its concrete walls sits a man you might never expect to find there. Not a killer, not a terrorist, not a gang lord. A con artist. His name is Jimmy Sabatino. Some say he's America's loneliest prisoner. Jimmy Sabatino's story begins not with violence, but with charm, confidence, and ambition. Born around 1976, he discovered early that he had a talent, a powerful one. He could make people believe anything. By age 18, he pulled off one of his first major cons. He walked into a FedEx location, pretended to be the president of the Miami Dolphins, and walked out with Super Bowl tickets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And nobody questioned him. That moment shaped his identity. He wasn't going to steal with a weapon. He would steal with his voice. Over the next few years, Jimmy transformed himself again and again. A music executive, a movie producer, a record label insider, an industry powerhouse. Hotels in Miami, New York, even Europe fell for his act. He booked penthouses, lived lavishly, and left behind massive unpaid bills. To Jimmy, the world was a stage, and every lie was a performance. You would think prison would stop a con man. But for Jimmy, prison became his control room. Between 2015 and 2017, while locked inside a federal detention center in Miami, he got access to contraband cell phones. Then, using fake identities, fake business stories, and a voice full of confidence, he contacted high-end retailers. He claimed he needed expensive handbags, watches, and jewelry for major music video projects. And they believed him. The scam grew into a multi-million-dollar fraud, reaching more than $10 million in stolen luxury goods. He wasn't operating small-time tricks. He was running a full operation, making calls, directing people outside, moving stolen items, and sharing profits, all while sitting inside a cell. Investigators later said he had built a criminal enterprise from inside prison walls. That changed everything. Then something happened almost no one could believe. When Jimmy stood before the judge for sentencing, he made a request. He asked to be sent to ADX Florence. He said the only way to stop him from committing more scams was to completely cut off his contact with the outside world. Most inmates fight with everything they have to avoid ADX. Jimmy requested it, and the court agreed. A con artist, not violent, not dangerous in the traditional sense, was now headed to America's most isolated prison. When Jimmy arrived at ADX, he wasn't placed in a normal cell. He was assigned to a special wing known as the suites. This part of the prison is built for one purpose: total control and extreme isolation. His world became a 12 by 7-foot cell with concrete walls. Inside it, he is watched by cameras 24/7. Microphones monitor nearly everything. Human contact is almost non-existent, movement is restricted, and communication is heavily limited. He cannot freely contact friends or family. Only one family member and his attorney have limited access to him. He is also restricted from sending certain forms of legal communication to seek clemency. Inside ADX, even among isolated prisoners, Jimmy is one of the most isolated. So, why so much isolation? Jimmy isn't violent. He never used weapons. He never murdered or assaulted anyone. So why does he live under restrictions usually reserved for the most dangerous inmates? Because he proved something most criminals never do. He could run major crimes from behind bars. He used smuggled phones. He manipulated people. He coordinated fraud worth millions. Authorities believed that unless he was completely cut off, he would continue. To stop the scams, they didn't just take away his freedom. They took away his ability to communicate. Some say it was necessary. Others say it went too far. Either way, Jimmy ended up in a level of isolation that few humans ever experience. Jimmy Sabatino isn't just a criminal on paper. He's a personality. He once said, "The easiest scam to pull off is to tell someone something they already want to believe." That single sentence explains his entire life. And even after being caught, he didn't show regret. He told the judge, "I don't apologize to nobody. They should be embarrassed." To him, the world wasn't filled with victims. It was filled with people ready to believe what they wanted. His crimes weren't just thefts. They were performances. Stories he convinced people to walk into. Inside ADX, Jimmy continues to fight, not with scams, but with paperwork. He has filed requests and legal motions to challenge the communication limits placed on him. He argues that he is being held under conditions far harsher than his crimes deserve. But others argue that his isolation is the only thing keeping him from continuing his schemes. The question remains, is he being punished for what he did, or for what he might do if given the chance? Jimmy Sabatino's story forces us to ask, what does punishment mean for someone who isn't violent, but is highly dangerous in other ways? How do you deal with a person who can run million-dollar crimes with nothing but a phone? And is extreme isolation justice, or something else entirely? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Inside ADX Florence, days don't pass. They echo. For Jimmy Sabatino, each sunrise looks the same. Gray walls, a steel door, a narrow window that barely lets in the sky. He wakes up in the quietest place in America, a place he asked to be sent to. But this part of his story is not about the rise of a con man. It's about the heavy price he pays now, mentally, emotionally, and legally, and the strange battle he is fighting from inside the world's most locked-down prison. In ADX Florence, silence is not peace. It's pressure. It sits on your chest like a weight you can't push off. Inmates in the most restricted wing, the same one Sabatino is in, are kept mostly alone. No cellmates. No open yards. No easy conversations. The outside world becomes a distant memory. Voices fade. Faces fade. Time itself begins to dissolve. Psychologists have described this type of isolation as slow mental starvation. It's not meant to injure the body. It targets the mind. And Sabatino, a man whose entire life was built on talking, convincing, charming, and manipulating, suddenly had no one to talk to. For a con artist, loneliness is like cutting off oxygen. Every ADX inmate has rules, but Sabatino's restrictions are much tighter. Because he ran large fraud schemes from earlier prisons, officials fear that one phone call or one letter could restart everything. So in ADX, he is monitored almost all day, unable to freely write to most people, unable to communicate with the public, unable to contact businesses, and unable to send messages that could influence anyone outside prison. He's allowed only controlled communication with one family member and his lawyer. Everything he writes can be reviewed. Every moment in the shower or cell can be recorded. Even his reading choices can be limited. To most people, this sounds extreme. To the Bureau of Prisons, it sounds necessary. Because Sabatino is not an ordinary scammer. He is someone who kept running crimes even while locked up. ADX sees him as a man who does not need violence to be dangerous. All he needs is a voice. So ADX tries to remove that voice completely. The human brain needs stimulation. Sabatino once used his mind to plan scams, write scripts, invent identities, and fool companies across the country. But inside ADX, he has none of those tools. So he fills the silence with writing. He writes motions to courts, letters to his lawyer, requests to prison staff, notes about his mental health, appeals about his restrictions, and journals where he explains what loneliness feels like. He says the worst part is the feeling of fading, the sense that the world is moving without him, that he's becoming invisible. There are days he writes that he feels like he is locked inside a locked world. But Sabatino also believes he's being treated more harshly than necessary. He argues that he's not violent, not physically dangerous, not a risk to other inmates. He says that all he needs is limited human contact, a little more sunlight, a little more conversation, a chance to feel human again. Even cut off from the world, Sabatino is still fighting. He files legal documents trying to challenge the restrictions placed on him. His lawyers argue that he should be able to write to certain officials, that he should have more access to communication, and that he should not be treated like violent terrorists. They argue he is being pushed deeper into isolation than necessary. They claim that the Bureau of Prisons is blocking him from seeking clemency, the legal right every inmate has to request mercy. Sabatino wants the chance to write to the government, to ask for reconsideration, or at least to explain himself. But prison rules say he could use letters to manipulate people again. So doors that are open for other prisoners are locked for him. To Sabatino, that feels like a silent sentence, a punishment added on top of his punishment. To prison officials, it feels like the safest choice. Every time he files a new motion in court, he sends his voice out into a world that can no longer hear him clearly. But he keeps trying, because it's all he has left. People imagine con men as fearless. But Sabatino, in long written complaints, describes something very different. Long nights of anxiety, fear of losing touch with reality, moments where he feels time looping, and loneliness that feels like drifting into space. He describes anger at the system, regret for some of his choices, and pride for others. He even admits that part of him needed the isolation, because without it, he might have continued committing crime. But another part of him says something much simpler. I just want to talk to someone. In ADX, even the simplest human need becomes rare. A face, a conversation, a moment of laughter, a real voice. You can be alive in ADX, but you can feel like a ghost. Most people in ADX have long histories of violence. People who blew up buildings. People who ran dangerous gangs. Killers who cannot be housed anywhere else. And then there is Jimmy Sabatino, a man who never fired a shot, but managed to make multi-million-dollar schemes appear out of thin air. His danger wasn't in his hands. It was in his voice. That's what makes him so unusual. He was placed in the same facility as some of the most violent inmates in America because he was too persuasive, too clever, and too good at manipulating people on the outside. And because, even behind bars, he kept winning. ADX was designed to be the one place he couldn't. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please know there is support available. You can contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or other mental health services in your area. Reaching out is a sign of strength. Thanks for watching. Despite everything, Sabatino still hopes for a future. He hopes that one of his legal motions will reduce his restrictions. He will be moved to a lower security prison one day. He will be allowed to communicate more. He will get a chance to show he can live without scamming. He can rebuild some form of life. Even from behind bars, some inmates dream of freedom. Sabatino dreams of connection. He says that he wants to come out a better man, though critics say he's simply looking for a new stage to perform on. Only time will tell which one is true. People following his story are left wondering, how dangerous can one man be if all you take away is his phone? And the prison system asks the opposite. How dangerous is he if a single phone is enough to rebuild his empire? That question is why he sits so alone today, and why he may remain isolated for many years. Is he really America's loneliest prisoner? When people talk about Sabatino as America's loneliest prisoner, they aren't talking about punishment. They're talking about the strange shape of his life. A man who fooled the world by pretending to be someone important. A man who lived in luxury he never paid for. A man who ran million-dollar schemes with nothing but charm, phones, and words. And now, a man sitting alone in one of the quietest cells in America, with no audience, no stage, and no one to listen. In a prison full of men feared for their violence, Sabatino is feared for his voice. And so he lives in a world built to silence him. Jimmy Sabatino is still serving his sentence, still under extreme restrictions, still fighting from inside his cell, still arguing that his isolation is too much, still claiming that no one understands the cost of locking away a mind like his. Whether people see him as a criminal mastermind, a lonely manipulator, a man who cannot stop scamming, or someone who deserves a second chance, one truth remains. His story is not over. It continues in courts, in files, in his own writings, and in the silent hallways of ADX Florence. And as long as he stays there, cut off from the noise of the world he once fooled, the question remains, is America protecting itself from him, or keeping him in a prison far deeper than steel and concrete? That is the story of Jimmy Sabatino, a man trapped not only behind bars, but inside the silence he once asked for.